What news of the North?
I am William Wallace.
I might kill the fly up, but I'll try it. Are you in the habit of riding off in the rain with strangers?
It's the best way to make you leave.
Nothing new, Your Majesty.
I am skilled in the arts of war and military tactics, sire.
Are you?
Who is this person who speaks to me as though I needed his advice?
Is it a classic? Movies that do or don't stand the test of time.
I'm Paige.
I'm Brian.
And today we're talking about Braveheart, directed by Mel Gibson, written by Randall Wallace, and it was released in 1995.
13th century Scottish hero William Wallace returns to his homeland following the death of an heirless king. Wallace finds the political landscape precarious. Edward the Longshanks, King of England, has captured Scotland's throne and threatens the freedom of all Scottish people as tyrannical policies instituted by the English plague the Scots. Initially, Wallace is content to stand by the wayside, yearning for the simple life of building a home and raising a family. However, when the woman he loves suffers a cruel fate at the hands of English soldiers, Wallace takes a stand against the new rule. With his fierce patriotism and determination, he gathers an amateur but passionately rebellious army. Although this makeshift force may be outnumbered by the English troops, their desperation and love for their land surpass any military maneuvers, as evidenced in the film's breathtaking battle sequences.
So, the first memory I have of Braveheart is actually in high school. And it was because, I had heard Braveheart, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was a movie. I didn't know if it was just, shorthand for the story that actually happened. I just was not...
So you had just heard the name before?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I was in... this kid I went to high school... middle school was obsessed with it, and I remember we were in a theater class or something one day, and an argument came up about it, and I think it was kind of brought up to antagonize him a little bit.
Yeah,
just
somebody was fucking with him.
Because the movie is a little bit ridiculous in some ways, but it is a great movie. But
certainly heightened.
Yeah, they were, trying to get a rise out of him, and we were in an auditorium, so everything echoes, and he's generally pretty quiet, and eventually in the middle of the argument, he just screams, "Braveheart is a great movie!" So, I guess it might have been a great movie. But then I didn't see it. I saw it unexpectedly 2 years ago when we were on vacation in Aruba.
For the first time, right?
Yep, this was the first time I've seen it. We were channel surfing through the few channels that were available that night, and we came across the opening credits for it. And if I remember this correctly, I immediately remember you, Brian, saying, "Nope, this is what we're watching."
Yep.
I tried to protest, but because Brian shared the same fervor as the kid in high school, I thought, all right, it's time.
And also, there were only 2 or 3 channels to choose from.
Yeah.
It was one of them, we caught the beginning of a movie, so that was a win.
Yeah. Before we get into it, what I will share at the top is the day after we watched Braveheart in the hotel, we were swimming in the ocean, and I found myself thinking about the movie with a little bit of a heartache. And then it was immediately followed by a sharp annoyance, and I which led me to say I'm pissed that I like Braveheart so much. Because I like this movie a lot.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit more why you were angry?
I think because I knew it was there's a couple reasons. One, because Mel Gibson is at the center of it.
And
Mel Gibson is problematic for many reasons.
Yes.
But what is frustrating is that his talent is undeniable as an actor and director. I guess that's where that came from.
Mel Gibson as
and
a person.
also because I feigned a little bit of I don't want to watch this movie. I'm not in the
Especially
mood.
now.
It's so long.
So long, and it's fucking Mel Gibson.
And it's Mel Gibson.
All the time, and he directed it.
Right. So when I was thinking again, when I was in the ocean thinking about it, and like my heart was a little heavy, I was like, oh, wow, I love this movie, and I'm upset that I hate it.
Yeah,
That I
heavy
like
just
it.
because of like where the movie
Yeah,
leaves
it's
off
an
and the bittersweet
extremely
ending.
emotional, heavy emotional movie, I guess.
Yes, for sure. Intentionally so, I think. My first time seeing this movie, I can't remember specifically the first time, but it was definitely when I was like around 12, maybe a little younger, and I can pinpoint it there because I remember going to see a production of Oliver, like I mentioned to you earlier, in Boston as a child, and I remember the man playing Fagin, who's like the old trickster who like is leading the little kids, the creepy old man who has all the little children stealing from everybody in London. He was played by Mel Gibson's dad, the guy that plays him in this movie. I remember seeing that production of Oliver definitely at a younger age, so I must have seen Braveheart before that. So that's the only way I can pinpoint it. But I loved it. I loved it. I mean, I think I had probably seen, it was probably around the same time I saw Lord of the Rings, and it's in a similar vein of, you know, fantasy. Well, Lord of the Rings is more fantasy, but, you know, how fantasy borrows from medieval and the aesthetics of that. I loved it. And even as a kid, the runtime, because it's 2 hours and like 50 minutes long. But even as a kid, like with, you know, the short attention span of a kid, I stuck through it. And also, as we mentioned, the last episode we recorded was Pulp Fiction and, you know, little kids watching violent movies. You know, this was definitely in the track of a very violent movie that I watched at a young age, but enjoyed.
Did you watch it by yourself?
No, I specifically remember watching it with both of my brothers, and it was very much so like a bonding.
Was everybody
we
on
all
the same
loved.
page?
Oh yeah, on the same page, and we all quoted it to each other all the time. I specifically loved the Irish guy.
Yeah.
The fucking yeah, it's mine. Like the crazy Irish dude is hysterical,
Steven?
and we
Is
loved
that
him.
his
Steven was his
character's
character's name. We loved him
Played
as a
by
kid.
actor David O'Hara.
David O'Hara. What other stuff? I wonder what other stuff has he's been, because he's like definitely got a familiar face. But regardless, we all loved it. Me and my brothers. I can't remember if my sister liked it or not. She might have. She liked Mel because we also grew up watching the Lethal Weapon movies. So he was and also like Maverick. I don't know if anybody's seen Maverick, but it was the first thing my father bought on DVD. It's like a Western with Mel Gibson and Jodie Foster and James Gardner. So we were a Mel household growing up. Yeah. I loved it growing up, and
How many
was
times
very
would you
excited
say
to
you've seen
rewatch
it?
How many times have I seen it? Probably 20. Again, like the last one we recorded, you know, this is a movie I watched as a kid. I know it's weird because it's a very violent R-rated movie, but like, you know, when you watch movies when you're younger, you watch them a lot of times, and
Yeah.
it's very much so stuck in my brain.
Yeah.
But similar to last time, I wanted to really evaluate it as an adult. Yes, so your first time was a couple years ago. My first time was as a kid. We both enjoyed it severely.
Severely.
Severely, yeah. I mean, you enjoyed it enough to be upset the next day at how much you liked it because of how much of a problem Mel Gibson is, which at this age I also have conflicting feelings about. But again, I mean, that's actually funny.
There's a lot of shitty people out there. Just it's frustrating when they are legitimately talented.
Yes, and it's funny because the only other episode we've recorded, at least at this point, was Pulp Fiction and similar problems with Quentin Tarantino as a human being.
Yeah.
But you know, it's funny that this is the next one we're doing. Good old Mel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe we should talk a little bit about the history of how Braveheart came to be.
In the early 90s, producer Alan Ladd Jr. had the project when he picked up the script from screenwriter Randall Wallace. Randall Wallace adapted Braveheart from a 15th century epic poem by a guy named Blind Harry, which commemorates and celebrates the Scottish freedom fighter William Wallace. MGM at the time was going through a transitional period in 1993, and eventually Alan Ladd left the studio with Braveheart with him.
Oh.
At some point, the script crossed Mel Gibson's path, and at first he wasn't interested and turned down the film.
Oh.
But to ultimately rethink his decision to take on the project. A little fun fact here, Gibson was initially interested in just directing.
See, I didn't know that.
Yep, and seriously considered Brad Pitt in the role of William Wallace.
Shit.
But Gibson reluctantly agreed to play Wallace as well. I assume that's kind of some kind of studio push.
Wow, are there any more details about him wanting Brad Pitt? So
No.
wait, so this is 95. Where would Brad Pitt have been? So,
This is 94.
Okay, this is 94 when they're talking about it and stuff.
93, 94.
Yeah. So this would have been after Thelma and Louise, at least. So
Yeah.
he was on the rise. Good eye, Mel.
Yeah.
Good eye, man.
Yep. He knows his industry.
That's really funny.
So from there, once that was set in stone that Gibson would be directing and leading the movie as William Wallace, Gibson's production company called Icon Productions initially had trouble funding the film, but Warner Brothers was willing to fund the project under the condition that Gibson sign on for a Lethal Weapon sequel.
Oh, shit.
So anyone who loves Lethal Weapon
shit.
as much as Brian, Braveheart is responsible for the 11,000 movies that came out after.
Hey, there's only 4.
Only 4.
There's only 4. That's not that many in terms, at least in terms of 2021 sequels. The last one came out in like 98. In 2021, if this had been a thing happening, there would be like 10 movies by now. That's hysterical.
So that was the conditions with Warner Brothers. But the movie was still too big and they needed more money. So in the end, the film was funded by 3 different studios, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and 20th Century Fox.
Damn.
Filming began on June 6th, 1994. While the crew spent 3 weeks shooting on location in Scotland, the major battle scenes were shot in Ireland using members of the Irish Army Reserve as extras.
Wow.
To lower the costs, Gibson had the same extras up to 1,600 in some scenes portray both armies.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you have that, because I mean, this is pre-CGI to create, mass amounts of soldiers like there are in Lord of the Rings, which is kind of the first time there were that many in CGI shots. So, like, if you got 1,300 extras, yeah, you get your mileage out of that shit.
Yeah.
You switch them around and change your clothes for sure.
For sure. So I assume that when you're in the army, I think the same here, you can't have a beard or you have to be clean cut and everything.
Oh, interesting.
So in doing this movie, they were given permission to grow beards and swapped out their military uniforms for medieval garb.
Very cool.
Filming ended on October 28th, 1994, which to me is incredibly impressive.
August, September, 5 months.
5 months to film this movie that clocks in at almost 3 hours with these epic battle scenes. That's impressive.
That's
very
insanely impressive.
Yeah, and speaking of which, in post-production, Gibson was told to a couple things. He was told to tone down the battle scenes to avoid an NC-17 rating.
Yeah.
They must have been a lot more gory.
I'm sure they were, yeah.
And then the original cut, after Gibson worked with the film editor, clocked in at 195 minutes.
Okay, so that's like another 25 minutes on what ended up being.
From there, Gibson was asked to cut it down to 177 minutes, which is the cut that everyone has seen.
Yep.
However, there is a 4-hour version of the film, and as recently as 2016, Gibson said he was interested in reassembling and possibly putting it out there.
That's so interesting.
But that was 5 years ago, so.
Yeah, he's been making like weird little what would be direct to DVD, but is now direct to streaming, like action movies lately. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he'll get around to doing that.
Yeah.
I would watch that, but that also might take away so much of what makes this movie very, very good.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, to me, it feels long, but not in a laborious way. Like, it's not like it's like, oh, that was 3 hours. That felt like an hour and a half. It's like, no, this is a long movie, but there wasn't a point where I was like, all right, let's go. All right, let's go.
Again, yeah, I guess the shorthand would be it doesn't feel as long as it is. It does feel, like a big movie, but like...
You know what you're getting into.
You know what you're getting into, and as long as you're not watching it around the time that the sun is setting, you will not notice that you sat down for 3 hours, in my opinion.
Yeah, but something that's, as much as this film is loved for, the artistic merits of it in the way that Mel pulls at heartstrings with music and framing and a million other things we can talk about later. A big issue with this movie is that it is riddled in historical inaccuracies. I am not a historian by any means.
No, I think we should.
If no one told me otherwise, I would assume all of those things happened. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be tweaking, but there was so much so that a lot of historians came out of the woodwork. I think it was commented on in some of the critics' response.
Yes,
So,
I can note some of that when I go into the critical reception later, but we should definitely talk a little bit about the mass historical inaccuracies.
Yes.
I think for some people, maybe upon initially viewing this when it came out, part of what made it so moving was like, wait, this happened? You know what I mean? Because it's so heightened and it's so borderline Shakespearean where the plot goes towards the end. You know what I mean? With the way that they weave in very
It's totally
historically
Shakespearean.
inaccurate things. But it's helpful to talk earlier about all of the historical inaccuracies before we delve into what's good and bad about the movie itself. You know?
Right.
Hey Mel. Hey Mel. There's a lot of shit that is historically inaccurate about this.
So this film, well celebrated, is also known for its egregious historical inaccuracies. However, the screenwriter Randall Wallace defended the script by saying, "Is Blind Harry true? I don't know. I know that it spoke to my heart, and that's what matters to me, that it spoke to my heart." Which, in my eyes, valid. It's a movie. Like, you
Absolutely.
can totally take, what got to your heart from that poem, and it's a form of expression. Like, nowhere did it claim to say these things were real.
Well, they kind of did. I don't know if was there a based on or an inspired by true story like events card
I don't think
anywhere?
so. No.
No? Okay. They did in the voiceover imply though, because he says English historians will tell you that what you're about to see or something to that effect didn't happen. And it's like, well, yeah, because a lot of it didn't fucking happen. But there is some kind of implication in the narration, even though it is a movie, that it's intended to be like, this is a true story. And a lot of the figures are historical figures. Robert the Bruce is a historical figure. Longshanks is a historical figure. His son is an historical figure. Whether or not they're represented accurately is, again, definitely the question.
Yeah.
Do you have any details about some of the inaccuracies?
Yeah. Just kind of a funny thing I found. I think this woman is a historian. Her name is Sharon Crosa, and her quote about this movie is, "The events aren't accurate, the dates aren't accurate, the characters aren't accurate, the names aren't accurate, the clothes aren't accurate. In short, just about nothing is accurate."
Yeah, they weren't wearing kilts at that point, right?
Well, here I'm going to list off a couple of major ones. Among major inaccuracies, to name a few, include belted plaids were not worn by Scots in the 13th century. Prima nocta, which is essentially allowing the lord of a medieval estate take the virginity of a serf's maiden's daughter on her wedding night. So essentially, if you lived in this, let's say in this context, a small village in Scotland, and you and your partner get married, instead of consummating that night yourselves, an English nobleman will come in and do that for you.
Right. And that's actually also kind of spoken about, because Longshanks says, I'm reinstating, in the movie, he says, I'm reinstating prima nocta. Referring to that it was a thing that happened, hundreds of years before that maybe, but it was not at the time that this was happening. So in the context of the movie, he goes, oh, I'm reinstating this. But Edward Longshanks at this time never reinstated prima nocta.
Right, so this was not a thing, and
it's a big part of the plot, too.
Right, so first of all, prima nocta didn't exist at this point.
Right, it had already been done away with and did not come back.
Which kind of puts the main catalyst of the film in a weird position, because essentially it's William Wallace marries a woman he's known since she was a child. She's an adult now as well, and he didn't want her to be subject to prima nocta, so they marry in private overnight, and it's a secret. But then one of the knights or guards that keep watch of this small community decides to go after this woman and attempts to rape her. And she is ultimately killed because the law is if you strike anyone underneath the king, it's the equivalent of striking him, so they kill her.
Right, and because she bit, the guy was trying to rape her, she like bit his face,
right.
I think.
And, you know, after her death, William Wallace loses his shit.
Yeah, and they take down the post there, and that's kind of the catalyst to be like, well...
Right, so if prima nocta wasn't really a thing and there wasn't this predatory air around it or suspicion about it...
Yep.
This whole sequence of events in the movie wouldn't have happened. So it's silly.
It's certainly the inciting event, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so the fact that it wasn't even a thing at that time, it kind of like
very much so
puts the movie off its axis in the first place if you're looking at it from a historical view.
Point of view, yeah. They very much so took that and said, oh, what if he reinstated prima nocta? And that would give him motivation to yada, 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 you know? So it was very much so used as a
And I think,
device. It's effective.
Yeah, it was a good way to use that.
Yeah, some might say cheap, but again, look at the movie we're talking about. What movie is it trying to be? You know what I mean?
Right. Another is the occupation and independence of Scotland. In the movie, it suggests that Scotland was occupied by England for some time. I think someone says hundreds of years or 100 years.
Yeah.
But in reality, Scotland had been invaded by England only the year before Wallace's rebellion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So prior to the death of
damn.
King Alexander III, it had already been a fully separate kingdom. And then they came in, took over, and that's when all the stuff with Wallace happened. They weren't occupying the space for that long time.
Oh, interesting. Also, yeah, we should say that neither of us really know much about European history in terms of like hundreds and hundreds of years back. Like, I got a little bit in school, but because of my classes, it was mostly American history. So, like, I have very little in terms of actual knowledge of the history.
The portrayal of William Wallace, there's a factual strand that the historians agree to.
So he's an actual verified historical figure.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't actually know that. I didn't know if he was like a kind of myth, you know, kind of guy or not.
No.
Okay.
In the strand that historians agree to is summarized by a scholar named Matt Ewart. A couple of things that he collected was, one, Wallace was born into the gentry of Scotland. His father lived until he was 18, where in the movie he's killed when he's maybe 10.
Maybe 10, and also when he was 10 they had been occupying, like you were saying, which was also not true.
In the movie his mother isn't shown, so I assume that she's dead in the movie, but his mom didn't die until he was 24 years old.
Okay.
He killed the sheriff of Lanark when he was 27, apparently after the murder of his own wife.
Okay, so that actually is kind of verifiably true.
I couldn't find anything how his wife was murdered, but his wife was murdered, so he went and killed the sheriff of Lanark
so that
when
part
he was
is
27.
Kind of true.
Right. He led a group of commoners against the English in a very successful battle at Stirling in 1297.
And that is the first battle depicted in Braveheart.
Temporarily receiving appointment as guardian. Wallace's reputation as a military leader was ruined in the same year of 1297, leading his recognition as guardian. He spent several years of exile in France before being captured by the English at Glasgow.
Oh, shit.
This resulted in his trial for treason and his cruel execution.
Damn, so it was one battle.
Yep.
Literally one battle.
That's what it seems to be.
Yeah.
The whole thing is called the Battle of Stirling Bridge,
Yep,
and this brings me into my final bullet here, is Wallace's military campaign. Wallace did win a very important victory at the battle at Stirling. However, this battle is called the Battle of the Stirling Bridge. But the version of this battle in Braveheart is highly inaccurate, as it was filmed without a bridge.
There's no bridge, yeah.
Later, Wallace did carry out a large-scale raid into the north of England, but he did not get as far south as York, or in the movie in Yorkshire.
Which is kind of the second-ish battle.
Nor did he kill Longshank's nephew.
Right.
And then the only other thing that I thought was, kind of interesting with the military campaign was that, I guess it's a little thing, but two-handed swords would not have been used. It would have been a one-handed sword for that time period.
Yeah, so he wouldn't have had that big
ass sword
that Brendan Gleeson fucking chucks at the very end of the movie.
Right.
That's the closing shot.
And then
that sword would not exist at the time.
Right, and I mean that closing shot is beautiful.
Oh,
so,
the whole
sure.
thing is shot beautifully.
And then, also one other one is in the movie Queen Isabella, who is married to the king's son. So she and the son will be the next to rule. She's from France as a part of some kind of the king arranged her to marry his son.
Yes, who in the movie is played as a homosexual man.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that that's really
I don't
necessarily
know. It doesn't seem
accurate,
relevant.
or that relevant.
I think the point was to show that he was uninterested in her.
Right.
But the thing here is that this princess, soon to be queen Isabella from France, she did exist. However, while all of these events took place, she was only 3 years old. So she really had she didn't really have as much influence or impact as she did in the movie, because in the movie several times or twice
she had no impact.
She sends
she was 3.
No, right, but she was 3. But in the movie, she's an significant character because
absolutely.
she sends a warning to William Wallace twice.
She helps him twice. There's like a love, very, very truncated love, like subplot with her and William Wallace. Which again, she was 3. So anything that she's involved in this movie is completely historically inaccurate.
Exactly. So that's kind of my. I'm sure there are more, but those were kind of the big ones that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure kilts were not worn at this point yet either, and I do know that the years that they use are off by like 6 or 7 years, from what I understand.
Hit me with the facts. What was the cultural impact? Hit me with the facts. What is the cultural impact? Hit me with the facts. What is the cultural impact? Hit me with the facts. What was the cultural impact?
The cultural impact of this movie was pretty epic.
Because that's interesting, because I didn't know that anything happened because of this.
Yeah, well, in America, epic in a way that people loved it. It kind of rebirthed or started a path for these sword and sandal big battle medieval movies,
which you love,
which I love.
Yes, and I do as well. I think it did. There were kind of some other ones in the early 90s, like Excalibur and The First Knight were around, but like they weren't huge like box office draws like they became after this. So right. I think it's actually
And I'm sure whether it was conscious or not, it certainly served as like a base or even a cue for shows like Game of Thrones, like the battle scenes and that.
Oh, for sure. I think Lord of the Rings also, those battle sequences, definitely there's that first Battle of Stirling is so well done.
Yeah.
Well,
to the movie's effect. So here it performed.
Yeah,
great.
And it had some influence on what was funded as blockbuster movies in the years after. We'll talk about Gladiator another day. That might not have gotten funded the way it did if Braveheart wasn't as successful as it was.
Right. I don't think they knew at the time how much people. Well, I think the story was enough to grab a large audience, but I think there was an underlying thing of people wanting more sword and sandal kind of content if it's done well.
If it's done well, it's, there's a reason that it was done in the 50s a lot. It was epic. Like that's, the word of the day. Epic.
Right. The movie's effect in Scotland was even more profound.
See, this is interesting. I didn't know anything about this.
And it spawned a new nationalism movement. Lynn Anderson, the author of Braveheart, From Hollywood to Holyrood, HOLYROOD,
Hollywood to Holyrood,
explained in an interview, it has become a part of the fabric of Scotland. There was anger that people didn't know who William Wallace was and had been cheated of their history. But whether it's a myth or reality, it created an aspirational national hero at a time when we needed more heroes. Historical inaccuracies did not stop supporters of Scottish nationalism from using the film to promote their cause. Members of the Scottish National Party would stand outside of movie theaters handing out pamphlets to moviegoers, while their leader, the party's leader, Alex Salmond, would tell people William Wallace was a campaigner for Scottish independence, and I would have been on his side at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. He is now the first Minister of Scotland and leader of the yes side in the referendum.
So in 2021.
The
Or
vote,
is this the yes? So the yes referendum is what is 2018?
I think it was 2018. Well, they've voted on this several times.
Yeah.
2018, I think, was the most recent one.
I remember it happening in like maybe around 2012, 2013 as well, when I was still in college.
Possibly. In 2018 or whenever the most recent one was, I saw when I was in Boston, I saw stickers in Boston to vote yes. Obviously, we couldn't vote as Scottish for the Scottish people. Ultimately, even though the volume has increased for seceding from England, and the volume has certainly increased, but there is a rooted population that there was enough votes to say no, and they're still a part of England, or the UK, rather. Yeah,
I was going to say, so they're part of the UK. And have they ever truly been independent, I guess is my question, because they imply well, not even imply, they say straight up, Mel in his only narration at the end says that they won independence, and it's like...
Maybe for a time, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. And maybe it's a bittersweet thing if they did win independence for a time and then lost it again or something like that, but I never remember hearing about them actually winning other than in Braveheart.
I just looked it up.
Okay.
The Kingdom of Scotland emerged as an independent sovereign state in the early Middle Ages and continued to exist until 1707.
Oh.
Scotland subsequently entered into a political union with the Kingdom of England on May 1st, 1707 to create the new Kingdom of Great Britain. So it could rule its own state. I think it has its own crown, but at the end of the day, they are not its own country. It is a country, but it's still woven into
the political and governing body is woven into the UK.
Right, where you think of Ireland. Ireland is not part of the UK, but Belfast is part of the UK.
Right. Yes, and
which is occupied and owned by the English, Bloody Sunday, all that stuff.
All that jazz. I was gonna say all that good stuff. I was like, you shouldn't even say that in
jazz. Critical reception. Critical reception. Critical reception.
Critical reception. The critical reception for Braveheart was mostly good. Most people really, really liked Braveheart. I got a couple reviews from the time, both released in May of 1995. But before I do that, let me go over the current online scores. We have Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score, currently, as of August of 2021, is 78%. So most critics enjoy it. 78% on Rotten Tomatoes is not the worst for critical reviews, but it's certainly not overwhelmingly positive. But the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 85%, so a little higher than the critics. Metacritic, based on 20 reviews, has it at 68%. So it's not as high as other movies that would, be considered classics, but 68 is still considered positive on Metacritic. What do you think? Should I do the quote from the positive or the quote from the negative first?
Let's start with positive.
Let's start with positive. Okay. So Karen James from the New York Times, article published May 23rd, 1995. She says, "The story of William Wallace, who led the Scots in a struggle for freedom for England's brutal rule, Braveheart, evokes old-fashioned movie epics. Gibson's stroke of brilliance is to revel in those epic qualities, tragic romance and unbounded heroism, gorgeous photography and a cast of thousands. Braveheart is also an explosive action movie. The logical comparison is not with the pallid Rob Roy, but with a Die Hard film. The medieval Scots use spears, swords, axes, and giant rocks, and they use them with a vengeance. Some viewers will surely balk at the movie's graphic, bloody violence, but Braveheart is a great, ambitious gamble that pays off. In his second film as director, Gibson has come through with an exhilarating, new-fashioned epic."
Yeah.
So that's a pretty glowing review. Those movies she mentioned, Rob Roy, it's so funny. It came out the same fucking year, and it's essentially the same story. It's with Liam Neeson, and Tim Roth plays the bad guy, and we spoke on the other episode how much we love Tim Roth. He was actually nominated for an Oscar for Rob Roy because he's supposed to be very good in it. But yeah, essentially, I mean, saying it really, and that's what we said. You know, it showed people that, oh shit, these period pieces can be blockbuster movies. They can be action packed, and they can be, you know, like we were saying, Shakespearean in terms of the elevated stakes and how the subplots interweave and whatnot. So that's a pretty glowing review for Braveheart from 1995 from the New York Times. The other review is not so glowing, from the Washington Post, a gentleman named Desson Thompson. This is an article that was published on May 26, 1995. Gibson's second directorial effort, in which the oppressed people of Scotland are led to freedom by a short man with dazzling blue eyes, a dreadlock wig, an Australian accent, and excellent biceps, is a rambling disappointment. That's pretty rough to start off. What little is known of the real Wallace comes from isolated facts and a lengthy, fanciful ballad attributed to, in parentheses, I am not making this up, a sightless poet known as Blind Harry. So Gibson has much available license. However, he's excessive on every front, whether it's the syrupy, backlighted romance between Wallace and Murren, or the heather-thronged killing fields. Few can guide a big project to more than competent completion. Gibson has shown the world how good he looks in a kilt. He has demonstrated how easily he can arouse women of the Middle Ages. And yes, he has guided this tale to completion. But now it's time to put the pants back on and return to Los Angeles. Veteran detective Danny Glover, who is still facing retirement, needs help against an international terrorist ring, or something like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this person sounds like they just all kind of fucking hate Mel Gibson in general.
Yeah.
But also, I understand what they're saying.
I hear what he's
for
saying
sure.
too, because I think in some light, I think I find the romance like a little cheesy, but also to me, like this movie knows what it is, and like
Yes.
I lean into
Maybe
it.
it takes itself a little bit more seriously than we do, but yeah.
Maybe.
But
it doesn't bother me because the whole movie is so heightened, and it kind of just weaves into that melodramatic field.
Yes, and you just actually landed on something that I've been waiting to talk about. That is what I had in the back of my mind the entire time that I started watching this, was just like, this is to the T melodrama. It's why you felt so impacted in the ocean the next day, because the way it's constructed and the liberties they take, which is what, you know, most of, I guess, because it is, I didn't realize it was true that his wife was murdered. But they take a lot, like we were saying, with the prima nocta, and that is a huge plot point for their vengeance and you know, quest for freedom. It's meant to be, like we were saying, Shakespearean. It's melodrama. It's constructed to lead your emotions exactly where they want them to go, and to get them to the same level of the
formula.
stakes. Yeah, it's a formula. There's no way you can watch this movie and not passionately root for the hero. It's, you know, constructed, it's scientific. It's like a really, really catchy fucking pop song. Whether you hate it or you love it, you cannot get it out of your head. It is designed scientifically to stay in your head, you know? So I think that is something that maybe this reviewer is missing, is that the movie is certainly what it intended to be.
Yeah, for sure. Did it win any awards?
It won quite a few awards. Not a ton, but quite a few.
What awards did Braveheart win?
So we have the Golden Globes. They were nominated for Motion Picture Drama. They were nominated for Best Director, Mel Gibson. They were nominated for Screenplay, Randall Wallace. They were nominated for Original Score, James Horner. Pause. I fucking love this score.
Yeah, me too.
So much. It is so goddamn good.
Yeah.
And we continue. The Golden Globes, I think the only win was for Best Director for Mel Gibson.
Interesting.
Did not win any of the other ones. At the BAFTAs, they were nominated for cinematography, direction, makeup, hair, production design, score, sound, costume design. They won cinematography, John Toll. Best Costume Design, they also won at the BAFTAs, Charles Node. And they won for Best Sound. Per Hallberg and Lon Bender and Brian Simmons and Andy Nelson and Scott Milan and Ann Belmer. At the Oscars, they were nominated for Original Screenplay, Best Picture, Best Director, Original Score, Cinematography, Sound Editing, Makeup, Costume Design, and Film Editing.
No acting?
No acting
Interesting.
nominations. None. Is
You know,
it though?
No, it is.
Do you think Mel Gibson should have been
I'm not
nominated?
talking about Mel Gibson. I'm talking about Brendan Gleeson.
Oh, girl. You just fucking... you hit it on the... I mean, I fucking love Brendan Gleeson.
Or, I mean, I don't know if he had
bit.
enough screen time, but James Cosmo as well.
James Cosmo is so good in everything.
But if
hold
there
on,
were
sorry.
going to be an actor nominated, I would have
Gone with Brendan.
gone with Brendan Gleeson.
You think he has enough screen time even?
Doesn't matter. Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, true.
Doubt.
Yep,
with
with
Viola
Viola
Davis.
Davis. Yeah, no, true. Argument's not, valid. Anyway, it won at the Oscars. It won Best Picture. It won Best Director. It won Best Cinematography. It won Best Sound Editing. And it won Best Makeup. So it won 5. I think it was nominated for 10. Won 5.
That's kind of cool that it was shaping up to not do great at the Oscars, and then it came through.
It came through, yeah. I mean, it got shut out on all acting awards, but that's good. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, Sound Editing, and Makeup.
Pretty solid.
I mean, it's a huge win for Mel. Again, like statistically, if you're directing, producing, and acting, you have a lot of chances to win. So like,
Would that have been the
you got 2 out of
Oscars
3.
in '96?
It was the Oscars in '96. The movies came out in '95.
I want to see what the movies were. Okay, oh no.
Yeah, the other movies were interesting. They weren't totally. I think that it should have won. I
Sure.
think Mr. Holland's Opus, I think, was nominated. What are the other ones that were nominated for Best Picture? Do you have them up?
I'm about to. Okay, the Braveheart won against Apollo 13.
That's right. That was the big one,
The Postman.
which is an Italian movie, not the
Il
Kevin Costner.
Postino.
Yeah, not the Kevin Costner movie.
Sense and Sensibility.
Ugh.
And Babe.
Oh, that's right. Babe was nominated for Best Picture. That's fucking
amazing.
hysterical, man. Yeah, I think Braveheart
Yeah.
probably of the ones I've seen. I've not seen the Italian film, but of those movies, I think Braveheart wins Best Picture. For sure. I think that it should have won from, again, I haven't seen all the movies, but it from what I've seen, it should have won for Best Director as well. I guess.
Wait, can I just say something interesting?
Yeah.
How we were saying that he did a great performance. I'm not writing the Oscars any letters, but for
Right.
someone like Brendan Gleeson, if he were to be nominated,
Yep.
it's kind of funny. Well, even though he wasn't, there are other elements here of things we were just talking about. If he were nominated, it would be for Best Supporting Actor.
Sure.
And the nominations for that year.
Oh, Spacey won that year.
Yes, for The Usual Suspects. But
Yep.
the other
That's
nominations
fucking tough, man.
was James Cromwell for Babe,
Ugh.
Ed Harris for Apollo 13,
Yep.
Brad Pitt
For 12 Monkeys, which you've never seen. He's fucking great
I
in
know.
12 Monkeys, man.
And Tim Roth for Rob Roy.
Yeah.
So,
That's
it
the
was
thing.
plausible. It's just strange that
All of those crossed roads.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Also, my favorite part about that little bit is that James Cromwell is supporting actor, which means that Babe is the lead actor.
yeah, of course,
Babe.
obviously.
The pig is the lead actor. If somebody were to be nominated,
As that
it would be the pig.
yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't shock me that they didn't get any acting nominations.
Yeah, it's fine.
I don't think Mel would have been too butthurt about it because he got a directing nomination and he got a Best
Not to
Picture
say,
nomination.
like, his
and he won
performance
both of
is
them.
good. It's
His
not,
performance is, I guess this is a good transition for us to talk about, what do we think about this movie after having reviewed it this time?
As I was watching it, I was thinking I'm having a very hard time. I'm having a hard time analyzing it because, for whatever reason, good, well-made sword and sandal movies suck me in, and I'm very present and am in the world, and I have a harder time.
Breaking it down.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a little bit easier time.
Brian has an obsession with pacing. Brian has an obsession with pacing.
So I was kind of keeping track like I did last time. This is probably something I'll do going forward as well. I'm obsessed for some reason with pacing, and I'm obsessed with how kind of beats are broken down within movies. And you'll hear me flipping on my little notepad here. But I broke this down into 5 parts that it's kind of, up little like mini climaxes that happen in the movie. So you get the first 15 minutes, young William Wallace, his family gets killed, he's completely orphaned, goes off with his uncle to, they don't say where he goes, I don't think, but he goes, abroad somewhere to get educated with his uncle because his family died. Little girl gives him a flower, that girl ends up being his wife, right? So the first 15 minutes, you get Brian Cox as Uncle Argyle. Actually, his name is Argyle. I fucking love Brian Cox.
Yeah, he's great.
Literally everything he's in, he's incredible. Cannot get enough Cox.
Great.
So that's a 15-minute intro, and then William Wallace comes back as Mel Gibson, older. The next 40-ish minutes is basically him courting his wife now that he's back home, reuniting with his friends that he knew when he was little, trying to settle back down and live off the land and marry his lady. And he marries her in secret because Longshanks reenacts prima nocta, and then some soldier sees them canoodling and then is like, hey, they're fucking. I need to fuck her because they're fucking. And it's my right as a soldier, and I'm a drunk old piece of shit. So essentially that opening section through to where she dies, it culminates with the siege of their kind of noble area. Mel Gibson comes back and the Scots essentially overthrow that place, and that's really to me the first big beat. Like that's a huge, I mean, the way it's shot, and again, we talked about this movie is 2 hours and 50 minutes long from opening until the credits roll. So that's a lot of fucking time, and this is about the 55-minute mark that we get our first little climax. And then after that, they're like, okay, the next section I labeled as taking an impulse revenge and turning it into a strategy for revolution and independence. It's about 20 to 25 minutes of them gathering their guys. We meet Stephen, the crazy Irishman who's fucking hysterical. We get more development with James Cosmo, who we talked about earlier, and Brendan Gleeson and Mel Gibson, and we're really like digging into their characters. To me, that's part 3 is them essentially getting ready for battle. Part 4, we have battles and politics. We get the Battle of Stirling, happens at about the hour and 15-minute mark. That's where he gets his big fucking freedom speech. The battle is like 15 to 20 minutes long. It's the longest battle sequence, really like the only huge battle sequence in the movie. The other ones happen, but they're all under like 10 minutes. They're pretty short. So at the end of this battle, they have like their spears. Through strategic means, they win, and it's a huge deal. That takes us at the end of that to about the halfway point in the movie. It's about an hour and 30 minutes in. Then we get the sack of Yorkshire, where they go down and they sack the castle at York. England moves to take Scotland, and that's where we get him talking with the French princess. They go back to save Scotland because he's going to sack Edinburgh, and then they have a battle at Falkirk that starts at about hour and 55 minutes in, and then that battle is about 10 minutes long, almost at the 2-hour mark. That's where Robert the Bruce betrays Mel Gibson.
Yep.
And that's kind of the downturn where it's like, oh shit, like we were on this high and now we're like very headed for a low. The aftermath of that battle is like another 10 minutes. It ends, in my opinion, that beat ends with Robert the Bruce yelling at his daddy and resolving to do the right thing the next time, basically. So to me, that's part 4, just battles and politics. And then part 5 is revenge, unnecessary romance, and capture and torture. So at about the 2-hour and 15-minute mark, so that's what? That's about 35 minutes left in the movie, right? 2 hours and 15. So that's this is beat 5. So Wallace, they get defeated. He somehow makes it out of the battle at Falkirk. And then he goes on his fucking crazy revenge fantasy and starts killing all the Scottish nobles who betrayed him at the Battle of Falkirk. Those sequences are super cool, super silly, but super cool and badass. Then after that, we get the very unnecessary beat and romance and like very short fucking
I think that's
subplot.
the only thing that could be cut out of this
I
movie.
completely agree.
That look,
I completely
whatever.
agree. In here, I wrote Princess Less Than Three's Wallace. Because to me, it's very much so like a super quick, just like, what are you in 7th grade? Like, you're fucking in love with this guy extremely quickly. And again, you would be 3 in real life. So this is all just super, super silly. To me, it's literally to set up some sort of win because Wallace ends up getting captured and killed. So like they have to set up some sort of win. And the win they set up is, hey, Longshanks, I fucking cucked your son, bitch. And like, that's to me hysterical that it's like, well, him getting like captured and killed really, you know, we can't, it's 1995 and we can't have it be too sad, so you know we have to have the lead fucking cuck this dude, which is basically what he's doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway. So the princess loves Wallace. They meet, they fuck, they make a baby. The remaining nobles, minus Robert the Bruce, because he resolved to be friends with Wallace and to help him from now on. But the other ones trick Robert the Bruce, tell Wallace that the Bruce is like, hey, come on back. And then he gets captured and he refuses to bend the knee. And the torture happens. He gets tortured and killed, yells freedom, and then we're told that the Scots eventually won their freedom in 1314. Mel Gibson tells us in a narration. Credits roll at about 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Brian has an obsession with pacing. Brian has an obsession with pacing.
And I guess, too, now would be a good time to talk about the performances.
Yeah. I said before that Mel turned in a good performance. Again, I'm not writing to the Oscars about it. It's certainly heightened and like a little goofy in some parts.
That is where Mel Gibson lives as an actor.
Yeah,
so it
like
is
right up
literally
toes
perfect.
the line of.
And
yeah.
also a lot of acting in the 90s did toe that line, you know.
Yeah.
And the 80s. But my favorite part, I agree. I think Mel is good in this movie. He's very good, especially for where this movie lives in terms of performances and how heightened it is.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that is funny to me, it just sticks out to me in every Mel Gibson performance that's intense. I don't know if you notice it as much in this. You get it when he's riding on the horse to go get Longshanks in the battle at Falkirk. But he does his weird little growl grunt. That is the funniest fucking thing to me.
I didn't notice that.
Like, it's
No.
like and he does it when he's after Sterling, when he lifts the sword up, he's like,
Kind of. I don't. I
okay,
guess
well,
I didn't
if
clock it.
you also, I clock it only because he does it in Lethal Weapon 2, whenever there's this thing where his character can dislocate his shoulder and he has to do it to like get out of a fucking straitjacket at some point or some shit. And every time he has to knock it back in, he does this like over the top just and it's like he finds a way to work it into multiple performances. Not everyone, but a lot of them. And that's just like, to me, that's the distillation of his ham as an actor. It's just like, yeah, that's what you do, Mel, and it works in the movies that you're in most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, because it's heightened, I find it accessible. Yeah, I think I find
it's
it.
fine.
Yeah.
Mel, no qualms. We were talking
Yeah.
too. It is super complicated. Again, we have to talk about it. Like he is on the record anti-Semite at different points. He's had problems with alcohol. He's had problems with how he treats his family.
Yeah.
You know, also very, very strict Catholic views,
Mm-hmm.
and it is not lost on me watching this movie in 2021. Oh, Mel did this because of the Christ imagery and because
I was thinking
of
that
the,
too,
you
yeah.
know, martyr
Yeah.
element of it. There's a lot of similarities between the torture sequence in this and the Passion of the Christ.
Oh, I'm sure
That's
that
where it
doesn't
really,
shock me at all.
yeah, it really connected to me. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
I think this is one of those cases where I have a problem with cancel culture, but we don't have to talk about that right now.
No, but we talked about it with Tarantino too, where it's, you know, the art is separate from the person.
And there are some things I can't separate, but for this I can definitely separate it.
Yeah, it's a case by case basis for me.
So, I mean, it's a ginormous cast. I don't think we need to talk about everybody. But as I said before, Brendan Gleeson, who plays Hamish, his best friend, William Wallace's best friend.
So good in everything he's in.
He's in it. He lives it. It's like he's in the world. And
Yep.
I don't know, I'm drawn to him.
Yeah, he's amazing in this. He's amazing in Bruges. He's, I mean, one of the few. This is controversial. Neither of us really like the Harry Potter franchise that much. I like it probably a little more than you do. He's in Harry Potter.
Well,
He's great in
I
Harry
don't
Potter.
dislike Harry Potter.
If
I just
anything-
didn't get on the like I tried reading the books when I was younger.
Yep.
And I don't know, it just wasn't for me, and then I
Same.
just missed all the movies, so I'm very self-excluded from the world of Harry Potter, and by the time, like, it was too late for me to get involved when I realized my peers,
We're deep, like, in zealot
which
fashion.
is fine. Like, I at the
Just-
time I was really into Roald Dahl.
Yeah, it's a very
And
passionate fan base.
Yeah, and I had the privilege of being introduced to Lord of the Rings at an older age.
Yep, and I was at a younger age, and that was
And
like,
I think the Lord of the Rings turned into my Harry Potter. But anyway.
Yes, same. But moral of the story, if there's
Brendan Gleeson.
any universal redeemable quality about the Harry Potter movies, it's the adults' performances, and in that is Brendan Gleeson. Like, he's just so good in everything that he's in. Also, another Sword and Sandal classic, he is wonderful in Troy as Menelaus. Yep.
Yeah.
Paige likes Troy.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Anyway, Brendan Gleeson's incredible. Brian Cox is incredible. Fucking, I don't know the actor's
Cosmo.
name. Well, yes, James Cosmo, who again plays he such a badass in everything that he's in. He's in Game of Thrones. He's in he's also in Troy, I think.
Yeah, I was saying I've only ever seen him in Game of Thrones, and his character in Game of Thrones is pretty reserved.
Mormont.
Yeah. So it was really cool to see him be
He was a
colorful
little,
and
he was a
loud
little more
and
youthful
dynamic.
and a fucking badass, man.
Yeah, he's good. Like I
He gets
really
shot
enjoyed
with an
watching
arrow.
him.
Hand cut off as an old fucking elderly Scottish warrior, and he lives for like 3/4 of the goddamn movie,
Yeah.
only dying when he gets an axe to his stomach.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
Amazing. And I don't know the actor. He has the scar on his face that played one of his other buddies that gets killed, I think, at the Battle of Stirling or at the Battle of Falkirk. Tommy Flanagan. He's a great character actor. He's in like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, who is he in Guardians of the Galaxy?
He's one of the thugs, I think, in part 2. He's not a super consequential character. He's like a very tiny character in that, but he's one of those guys that I've always really liked. He's in Smokin' Aces. He's in a lot of random movies. He just pops up everywhere. His IMDb.
It says here he was in Gladiator.
Yes, he is in Gladiator. He's his little handyman. He's his hand servant who ends up getting hanged.
Vaguely.
No, it's his buddy who when he's fighting as in the games, his buddy comes back and he's like, "It's you, it's Mac. Like you're my like quote unquote master." He was like his head guy, his first hand man. Shit, I forgot he was in Gladiator. But yeah, he's Tommy Flanagan. He's so good. He's in a bunch of these things as character actor. Is one of those guys that should be given more.
You know who? I mean, everyone turned in a really good performance. Patrick McGowan, he played the king.
Oh yeah, old
He's great.
Edward Longshanks. He's very. I mean, he's on the walking the perfect line of mustache twirling. Like
Yeah, but again, that fits the movie.
Yeah,
what it's trying to
totally,
do.
totally.
I think the only actor that I didn't dislike his performance, but he was the only one that I was like, it could have been more interesting or a little better, is Angus McFadden, who plays Robert the Bruce.
I strongly disagree. One of my
He's not bad.
One of my hills I will die on is how Angus McFadden is tragically overlooked as an actor. I think he's fucking incredible in this movie. I think he's great.
He's fine, but he didn't blow me away like the other actors did.
Oh, he's the one that tugs at my heartstring, and maybe it's because I always identify with the people that like fuck up in some way and realize they fucked up.
It's not
That's
about
why
the
I'm
character,
born.
though.
No, but it's the performance that gets me. It's the same to go back to Lord of the Rings. That's why Boromir gets me, because he feels that regret and he fucked up. And like to me, Angus McFadden sells it in the same way that Sean Bean sells it, of just like they really make me believe and tug at my heartstrings and make me think of the times that I fucked up and realized it and caused irreparable harm. You know, it got me. I don't know where your soul is, but
Excuse me.
Angus McFadden is incredible.
I didn't say it was bad.
No, I know. I'm joking. That's so funny. So he's the one guy that you.
I was like, it's fine. He's fine.
Oh, I'll die on that hill forever. I don't
have a ton to say about the women because they had very few lines and very little screen time.
1995. It's 1995.
Yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the woman that plays his wife in the beginning, I think she's quite good. But yeah, Sophie Marceau doesn't have a bunch to do. Her plotline is very silly as the princess. So, but I think his wife in the beginning,
Catherine McCormick.
I think she gives a very good performance. She's just not given a ton. You
Yeah.
know? That section is like 35 minutes long.
Yeah.
That she's in. You know.
Would you recast anybody?
No, they got all the right character
I
actors.
know,
They got
I'm kinda
all
bummed
the exact
because-
right character actors.
Not bummed, but like I usually have a couple, and I said this in our Pulp Fiction episode too, where I tend to think about, but I think it's perfectly cast, and I think what I said before too about how I kind of get sucked in, so I'm not thinking about other things, like I was saying how Sword and Sandal movies kind of just grip me in a way where I'm not
where you're
analyzing
sucked.
it.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. I don't think I would change any casting. Again, I have a soft spot for Mel. He's one of those guys who sucks, but like I can look past it in terms of taking in the art. There's some people I can't. I can't really with R. Kelly. I can with fucking Mel Gibson. You know, it's a scale. It's a spectrum. But
For sure.
But yeah, no, he's perfect in this movie. Exactly what he needs to be. We were talking earlier just about how upsettingly charming he is.
Freakishly
he's so
charming.
fucking magnetic and charming
that
it's like ridiculous.
When he's like courting Catherine McCormick, who plays Murren, his wife, he's not. I can't even tell you what he's doing.
Yep.
But I was thinking to myself, and you said this too, and not in a weird way or like disrespectful way,
no,
but
obviously.
just like. If that were like if
that were me,
if he were talking to me that way,
I'd be toast.
I'd be done for. Like I wouldn't have a chance. I wouldn't have a chance.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. And I said before too, I hate saying it like this, but Mel Gibson, as horrible as he is in a lot of ways, he's a singular type of person, and there's something extremely special and different about him. I don't know what it is, but he's one of those people that just has that thing.
Quote unquote it factor.
I suppose, but even more to the next level though.
Yeah, like he's disarmingly charming.
Yeah.
Like, and I think also combined with just, you know, he can act to a certain degree. I don't think he's by any means the greatest actor in the world, but he's, I think, a very good director.
So what would you say is your favorite scene and your least favorite scene, or best and worst scene?
Yeah.
But this is pretty subjective, so let's say favorite and least favorite.
Yeah, subjective for sure. My favorite scene... Oh, it's so hard, man. It's super hard. The kid in me loves the sequence where he goes and kills all the Scottish lords who betrayed him, the nobles who betrayed him. No, the Scottish ones. Because remember, Robert the Bruce betrays him with the other Scottish lords.
Yes.
At Falkirk. So that sequence after that where it's just ridiculous. He rides into the guy's room with the fucking mace and just smashes his face in. Crazy shit. So that, the kid in me wants to say that. But also, I mean... The first battle at Stirling is incredible. I don't know, man. That's tough. It's one of it's one of those two. But I also love when he's bonding with all of his guys on the come up. That's what I'm gonna say. It is. It's when the Irish guy gets there. Stephen gives his little spiel, and that kind of 20 minutes there before the Battle of Stirling, where they're all just like kind of coming up together and they're getting the gang together. That's probably my favorite scene / sequence. I think my least favorite now, upon viewing it again, is definitely the backlit fucking Mel Gibson and his wife, or the character's name is Marin, where they're both just like ass naked, nips out, backlit, like their nipples are both backlit in like the perfect way.
It almost looks like...
That to me is easily the word, and where so it's basically both of the love scenes, I think. So silly. He can get married in the forest and
I like them because they're funny.
I know they're not
very
supposed to be 1995.
Funny,
they're very funny. But also, like, to me, it's just, like we were saying, take out all of the subplot and romance that takes up a ton of time with the princess and the latter part of the film. If anything, that's all you need to take out. It's like that stuff, and then that one, like, 2-minute scene where they, like, are weirdly just kind of standing next to each other naked in the backlit moonlight.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. a good sex scene's a good sex scene, but that was not
it
a good
was-
sex scene.
And it wasn't even really
funny.
a sex scene. It was just very, very silly. It was like you already had them get married in secret, and that whole the tenderness
Well, no,
of that
but they
scene.
have to consummate their. That's the whole thing. They have
Well,
to
sure, but-
consummate it because he doesn't want to share her / have someone take her virginity.
Well, yeah, but I mean, one would assume that happens anyway. You can gather that from them waking up on the stones the next day. Keep that shit. That's fine. But I'm just saying, get rid of that little bit. They get married in the woods, and you see them go off to the stones or something. Anything to keep that very silly thing from being there for longer than it needed to be.
Yeah.
Not super long, but those are the only two things that I think are the worst.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The standouts are the battle sequences, and now that you brought it up, anything Angus McFadden is in. Robert the Bruce.
Oh.
I think he's great. I think he elevates the scenes that he's in.
Yeah, I agree with you with my least favorite scenes. More so
Yeah.
the scene near the end of the movie with Princess Isabella when they have sex and she ends up pregnant with his kid because like.
Yeah, you don't really need. I mean, you can have her helping him, but just all of the scenes between where it's just the two of them, just make all of those shorter and take the romance out. Like,
Yeah, for my favorite scene.
or scenes.
I'm having a hard time off the top of my head.
I mean, you got the beginning where he's a little kid. Probably nothing there.
No.
When he comes back to the village.
I like that. I like when he first comes back and him and his friend
Yeah, I love that scene too.
like they throw the rocks at each other.
It's so fucking funny, man. Him and Brendan Glee, like that's the charm. That's
Yeah.
where it's like you have great actors plus Mel Gibson and his charm is just likable group of people to be together, especially if the situation isn't dire.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, to me, like, when I think of some of my favorite movies, there are certain scenes that stand out to me. But for me, this movie works for me as a whole. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I can be like, oh, I can't wait to watch this part every time. Like, I just enjoy it from top to bottom for what it is. Like, the battle scenes are awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, any tender moments with the guys is nice. I don't know,
the scene where Longshanks pushes his son's lover out of the window is definitely
God.
stand out to me. I mean, it's pretty funny, man.
I guess.
When he's like, "Oh, you're a military leader," oh, and he just like pushes
him out a window.
Yeah, it's definitely just like making him this cartoonish, over the top. Like one of the reviews says that nothing is over the top, and I'm like, I don't fucking know about that shit. There's a lot that's over the top about this movie.
Yeah.
But his performance to me is just so perfect. Like that's an old veteran actor that knows how to be a mustache twirling villain while not being obnoxious. You know.
I will say it's not a favorite scene, but I guess something that does stand out to me with, I guess, Mel Gibson's performance. Mm-hmm. Again, like I know he's heightened and super goofy, and
he's a ham in a lot of ways.
I'm adding the ham into consideration.
Sure.
But the scene where he's bamboozled by Robert the Bruce, and Robert the Bruce has a helmet on and you can't see his face.
Yeah.
And he dismounts his horse to fight, and Mel Gibson rips off his helmet, and it's revealed to be Robert the Bruce. And the way the look in Mel Gibson's eyes is, to me, it's real. It's so
man.
real, and
It's
like my
very
heart
effective.
breaks with it. Like he looks like he's gutted. By the way, that is one of my favorite words ever.
Gutted.
And I wish it was in the American
Vernacular,
English
yeah.
vocabulary, because it's such a good descriptor. Like I was gutted by that. Like it's so good.
I think that Angus McFadden also plays a great large part in that role too.
But just his reaction to that, really, the look in his eye looked real to me.
Yeah, it's a good beat for him.
Yeah, that's all I got. Would you say it's a classic?
Well, I mean, do we think it's considered a classic by most folk? Because I'm not sure it's as cut and dry as some other ones.
I'm gonna say it is.
You think it's considered a classic by kind of the majority of the public?
Yeah, and I mean it was a pioneer for the genre, kind of revamp of the genre.
Yeah, revamp of the genre for sure.
And it's just so quotable. Like everybody knows Braveheart, you know, like.
Yeah, you know what? In all honesty, those speeches.
And the speeches and like the amount of times freedom has been parodied. Like, to me, it's a classic.
It's silly to say, but stuff like that is what puts it over the edge as being a classic for me. Because those are the things, like, being a great film is important, and I think it is, this is a great film. I think it's very good. I think that, I guess you convinced me. I think it is probably considered a classic.
Oh, it's a classic! Oh, it's a classic!
Do we think it should be considered a classic?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it should be. It's a good movie. I think it's a really good movie. I think, there are a lot of, again, back to the online scores, it's only 78% critics on Rotten Tomatoes.
I mean, it's had a long time to sit.
Well, it has, but a lot of other movies that have had a long time to sit are way, I was kind of just grazing over, and like Matrix is higher, Lord of the Rings is way higher. Lord of the Rings is in the 90s.
Well, because Lord of the Rings is Lord of the Rings.
Yes, but also Braveheart. I mean, would you say Braveheart is as good as Lord of the Rings?
No.
Fellowship? You would not?
No.
Okay. I mean, I'm interested to watch Lord of the Rings again. I mean, I love it so much. I'm interested. No, but now with the reason why we're sitting at our kitchen table with a microphone in mind, because like.
Of course, I'd love to.
Just because this movie's 3 hours. Lord of the Rings is more than 3 hours, and it's like which one feels shorter? Which one feels like it goes by faster? I know that Braveheart goes by really fast, and Lord of the Rings I'm happy to sit through, but I'm curious to see. Examine the pacing in particular this time around. Out of 10, 0 is this movie is a piece of shit, and 10 is this movie is the second coming of Christ. Where does this movie fall?
You go first.
I would give this movie an 8.
Me too. That was my number 2.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we both settle on an 8 for Braveheart on a scale of shit and Next Coming of Christ.
Don't tell Mel Gibson that.
Again. If we are 1995, Mel Gibson, anti-Semitic. Mel Gibson, anti-Semitic.